as it stands right now. But the fact that you're talking about the dead hand of bureaucracy, also corruption, why did he opt to go to Tanzania?
And it's just because of...
the thing I'm talking about is maybe even if we welcomed Dangote by then,
yes,
and we had this issue to do with the refinery here or the extraction in Turkana,
yes,
him having all the, the machinery and the wherewithal, that will have been another boon for us. We'll be talking something different, yes, maybe in under Dangote refinery here in Kenya.
But I need us to be very careful on, thank you, Dibala, I mean, on how we actually mixing the two things, When you're talking about energy, I know power...
I prepare also to give you a closing remarks. I think this will be the last time.
When you're talking about the energy, power is divided into whether it is fossil fuels, that is energy, but at the same time now power is a different sector altogether, all under what we call the energy sector.
I agree.
And that's what I wanted us to make sure that we get it. When we're talking about number 8, let's not be enticed by number 8 positioning in terms of potential geothermal, utilization for Kenya, because geothermal is not a product. It's not a product that is available in every other country in the world.
Indeed.
It could be 10, but you're number 8. But I need to talk about what it is. Yeah, I need to talk about what it is that we have in terms of capacity of geothermal exploration. First and foremost, we need to realize that what has been making our power expensive in Kenya is because of the PPPs, what we call the independent power producers, IPPs, sorry. And the IPPs have actually been negotiating their rate too high, such that when KenGen receives this and now have to resell it again to Kenya Power, the power ends up becoming quite expensive. Before the former president Uhuru Kenyatta left office, he had actually sanctioned Parliament to actually, the Energy Committee was discussing about the IPP.
Indeed.
So that we can be able to look at the rate in which we attach to the IPPs in terms of each megawatt that we produce. In KenGen, in geothermal production in Kenya, it's good for public to know that we have 3 different companies that are actually exploiting this particular space. That is what we call the Allmat, which is an IPP from the US. And we have now our own 2 parastatals, that is the GDC, the Geothermal Development Company, and the KenGen themselves. So you find that when the Blacklock is looking at the interest, is because they're looking at the sustainability of that particular production, plus what we call the green power space. The green power space now, the solar and everything is coming a lot of funding. With
the renewable energy.
The renewable energy, yes. It's coming with a lot of funding and everything. These are the guys that are now able to influence the global money into what it is that they regard as renewable energy. And obviously they would want to take advantage because now there's a global understanding on tariffs of taxes and things that surround it. So it's purely profit hunting exercise for the global giants in terms of investment, and they're taking advantage of the pool of resources that they could be having. But I need to say something. Any economy is as good as the cost of power that they can produce. Earlier on in our debate, I had mentioned that we had a lot of interest from the EV manufacturing company who are actually interested with what we are calling the KenGen Special Economic Zone. The KenGen Special Economic Zone is only selling at the strength of actually providing you with the cheapest rate in terms of power. Because globally, every other manufacturer is looking at a cheap power because it's one of the biggest fixed costs that you can ever find when you're trying to do manufacturing. And you remember President Ruto at one of the, abroad, sentiments, he said that we cannot even operate what he called, we call these things called what, in terms of data.
The data centers.
Data center, yes. He said we cannot operate a data center because of the power requirement, scarcity and power requirement. So as we look into adding, as we look into improving, whether exploitation of wind power, whether exploitation of solar, which we can be able to produce a lot of it, we need to actually have proper structures, proper policies that actually attract investment without exploitation of the end consumer in terms of the price. So the determining factor is how much do we want Kenyans in terms of manufacturing, in terms of whatever, to pay for power. So once we identify how much we want to pay power, we can then work backwards and tell our IPPs that this is how much we are calling you to come and invest on producing through geothermal, producing through wind, like the Turkana wind power, producing through, solar, so that we can be able now to not be seen as a lucrative market because we have not protected our consumer. Because basically what we need to make sure we do is to protect the consumer. If you look at the Kenyans' complaints of late in terms of when they are attaching the cost of living, They've not been leaving cost of power, the tokens power behind. So they've been complaining that once I start operating a pocho mill, the amount of power that I need to pay is too much compared to how much it is that I'm getting in terms of, my gross revenues. So basically, what Wakili Kenyajui has been trying to say all along is that when you appoint people into cabinet position and they have absolutely no idea what happens within the confinements of that particular department, what do you expect? This is the policy holder. This is the guy who is accountable of your department. I mean, like C is this one expert we got from ODM. So if we are going to continue having this kind of appointments, ladies and gentlemen, we will never make any strides and progress in terms of proper prior planning of what it is that we would want to see our country get.
The argument is always...
In terms of growth, let me sum it up by saying,
they're always ceremonial.
If we want to become an industrial country, if we want to sort out the issue of youth unemployment, we need to industrialize our nation. And we cannot industrialize our nation if we do not sort out the issue of power and the cost thereof.
Thank you. Wakili.
I wholly agree with what Mbote has said. But for me, it would be like, because if you say that if we need to mark up or at least have whatever it is that the Kenyan consumer should be paying for power, then we work around about that. The starting point is that we should have a policy where we have the cheapest electric generation output. It shouldn't be that we have any IPP that depend on fuel in order to get our grid to be at the level of sustainability, because it's unsustainable. If you remember, like Mbote said, when the last government came up with that policy, we need to stem and stop reliance on IPPs. There was a visit to Parliament, I think late last year. But those IPPs, the real drivers, the real owners, the directors remain still masked, opaque. We do not know who they are as at now. Is that the Kenya that we want, where someone actually is enriching themselves outside of the practice of the law and they remain faceless out there? Mbote has mentioned about the rise in consumption of power outside the domestic market, which would alarm the domestic user in terms of the demand then spiking, especially by the data centers. If you're in Georgia, for instance, right now in the US, there are all these complaints about the data centers taking up so much power that the power rates have hiked by nearly 100%. The water that is being consumed has also been taken up by those data centers. Now here, BlackRock had engaged the president so as to build a data center in Oak Area with Microsoft. And it was solely for that purpose. So you can see the lack of patriotism is just reeking and coming out of all these policies that this president is embarking upon. Is our priority the establishment of a foreign-owned, foreign-controlled data center here for purposes of neo-colony, digital colonization, so that then Kenya becomes the hub of collecting the data of the East Africa?
But wouldn't that also, the flip side, be another way of looking how we can outsource, not really outsource, but we can actually export? Yeah, once we have enough energy, that will be a good source of revenue as well.
No, but I'm saying...
In the light of artificial intelligence, this is why the data centers
but I'm saying
need a lot of energy.
No. The purpose of the construction of the data center, of developing the geothermal is not in order to promote what is available on the grid.
Yeah.
It is actually to enable a foreigner establish a data center for their use in the neo-digital colonization, because they need to collect your data, harvest it, utilize it. Here, you are aiding and abetting a colonizer to take up your resources, spike up your prices, because all data centers, wherever they are, Greece or London or the UK or in California, they consume so much electricity. Is that a policy we have clarified?
We haven't. We need to clarify. Thank you so much. Rachel, your closing remarks as well.
Thank you, Ndimuli. So, Dabal, sorry. One, don't call them the so-called expert from ODM.
I'm sorry. But they are.
Because just like any other Kenyan, they think they also have the qualification to hold any office in this country. And secondly,
Are you defending the indefensible here?
I'm defending anyone in any position, including the ones from Central Kenya.
Are you defending incompetence?
Because, no, there's no incompetence
We
here.
need to wind
Because
up.
before the,
Rachel,
no,
we need to
I
wind
was
up.
not interjecting them,
We
but
need to
I
wind
need to
up.
respond to them. I think Kenya is not short of policies or regulations, even within the energy sector, that they keep saying we need to build or come up with other policies or regulations to streamline the operations within the sector. I think we have quite a number of policies and regulations that regulate the operations within the sector. Secondly, I think there is quite a number of IP, you said it's very opaque or myopic in your opinion, and the government is not coming clean and transparent in telling us who are these IPPs holders. We have within the wind power sector, the solar power sector, the geothermal power sector, including one that he mentioned, Lake Turkana. All those are IPPs.
I mean, the ones that use diesel. I mean the ones that use diesel.
You said you don't know. So if you come here, you'll see and their contribution, the 30%, and who holds what within the 30% contribution.
I think he was talking about the faces behind the IPPs.
Yes.
So I want to believe if you want to do that, then you go look for CR12 and you'll know who holds this.
Yeah.
No, have you checked?
Yes.
Then you can tell us. I went to check, for example, all power.
Which you don't have time,
for
Rachel.
geothermal. No, I'm just telling him to go check. But I think it is important to accept that the CS has come out, and even the president reiterated that the fuel supply that we have, the sector is stable. That they have enough in stock, sufficient stock, that would meet the demands of all the Kenyans within a particular period which they've given.
All right.
And so I think it would be unfair to say that there are no measures being taken. There are measures being taken also to reinforce the sector and just for transparency and also to protect the suppliers.
All right, Rachel Omolo.
So the government is doing something.
They're not.
All right, Rachel Omolo there, public policy and governance expert, Wakili Harrison Kinyanjui, and Ikua Wambote, political analyst as well. Thank you so much for that very trenchant, very incisive and immersive discussion that we've had this morning. I think is broadened our understanding on what is happening with the energy crisis, so to speak, or the looming energy crisis, just to put it correctly as it stands right now. Thank you for your valid company. And it's all about also money. On the other side of the break, how then do you spend your salary? Do you have enough to sustain you for the longer haul of the month? That is being handled by an auditor on the other side of the break. Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming through. Asante sana.